I moved to Lamlash village in 2008 and started attending Lamlash Parish Church on a Sunday thereafter. So here we are in 2022, and I've done various things in Lamlash Church, including playing the bells, being the Sunday school leader, involved with Messy Church. So I was a newsletter editor for 5 years as well. So I just felt it was a good time when things were happening in the Church of Scotland, and some of our more elderly people are getting into their 90s. It would be a nice idea to have capture some memories, stories of what people can remember about Lamlash Church. So I'm so grateful to Chris and Jan Atkins from Positive Pictures, who agreed to video record these interviews for us, and also to Charles Currie, who gave up his time and his talents to interview our folks. So I hope you enjoy it. I certainly have enjoyed being part of the process, and hopefully it will capture what's happened in years gone by in our village church for the enjoyment of everybody.
This is Kilbride Church in the Lamlash in the island of Arran. For 136 years this has been the place of worship for the people of Lamlash. Christenings, weddings, funerals, always part of the community. And that community is now feeling that it's no longer going to have this church. So I want to talk to people who have been part of this congregation, who have brought so much to the church and to whom the church has meant so much. Come in and we'll talk to them now. First of all, Ian, how did you come to Arran?
To Arran? I came here in 1969 to be head of the science department from Ayr Academy. And after about 2 years, we decided the kids really were enjoying being here, so we just stayed, as many people do.
You got involved in the community life more or less right away?
Well, kind of, yeah. One of the main things actually was the fact that, first of all, here I've been an ordained elder in Ayr previously, so you're fair game to go to when you go to a new church, and I ended up in the kirk session here.
Now, as a session clerk for here, you must have been very conscious of the history of the church.
Well, you dig up things from previous session clerks and so on. I mean, for example, the fact that it's an A-listed building is obviously, well, it can be something around your neck, if you like, but this roof, barrel roof, is unusual. This cedilla here behind me, the 3 seats, is a pretty unusual feature in Presbyterian churches. If you look up at the back, you'll see the inscriptions of various people on the back pews. And some of them are actually quite interesting because they're folk from the Second World War who were on church parade when they were here. Mm-hmm. Obviously, up at the back, weren't interested, so there's from names. And there are names there of people from 1944, and probably going on. And one important person who passed away just a few months ago, at about 92-3, was Jessie Taylor,
yes.
Spud's wife. Her name's up there. Don't ask me why.
Because I think she was a naughty girl when she was...
Well, she's well mentioned in several journals.
Yeah. But during the war, Lamlash was very, very important to the Navy
it was, really.
and the founding of the commandos as well.
Well, exactly. This is why we have commandos flag up there. And the cockerel on top of the church has got 2 bullet marks on it, where a couple of soldiers who were over at billeted one of the houses behind Thompson's yard now, decided one night they would take some pot shots at this thing for practice. And they did. They hit it about twice. And there are marks on there which will not be seen now unless it ever comes back down. And that's what it was. 2 bullets.
So with the Navy being in the bay, I suppose their connection, because I do know that the Navy was, when this church was built, the Navy was already record. So they would use here for Sunday service.
Well, they did. And that was an important thing, of course, especially probably during the war. And because they were marshalling ships for going abroad, convoys, as well as keeping the bay free, and they had guard ships at each end, I believe. And that's, of course, why a number of people who were stationed there married local people here and came back to live here.
As was Spud and Jesse.
Spud and Jesse is an example of that, that's right.
But the legacy of this church, I mean, for instance, this organ.
Well, that's right. I mean, that organ was donated by the lady who was the daughter of the then Lord Provost of Glasgow, and I think it was 1934. It's a very, very good organ. And then the bells, of course, are quite unique. And they are unique. I think they're only one of about 15 types of that chime in Scotland.
And are the only ones with Scottish bells in them?
As far as we know,
yes.
The last one's made by a Scottish foundry anyway. Dating back to 1930s or even earlier, and they're 9-byte bells, rung by, as you probably know, one person.
So you'll have had a few ministers during your time?
Oh yes, Douglas Fulton was the last long-term minister.
Yes, yeah.
I think he was here for about 30 years. And I think as the way things have gone in teaching as well, the subsequent appointments have been rather shorter.
Yes.
Perhaps because of the influence of partners or whatever. And it's the same here. We've had about 5 ministers since then, over short time.
There doesn't seem to be the longevity that there used to be.
There isn't. One that we knew of and finally discovered about was when somebody who had retired decided to do some work on the gravestones up in the old part of the churchyard, and discovered that there was a minister here called the Reverend Colin Campbell. We have communion silver engraved with his name, and the date 1855, I think, or 52, his name's on the list out at the front there. He, we discovered, was the great whatever predecessor of J.K. Rowling.
Oh, that's something, yeah.
So the then person who was running our restoration scheme did not hesitate to write to her, and we got a very generous donation from her.
Oh, that's nice.
With a polite letter saying, "Don't come back to us because I don't do this kind of thing." She's into homelessness and
yes,
as you know.
Yes.
So, but that was a one-off, and it was really.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And you've had some pretty famous people through the door.
Well,
as Lady Jean would be.
Lady Jean, well, she was here sometimes. Jack McConnell, of course, you know Jack. His family have been members here, and Lord Mackay, who passed away not too long ago, he was
top judge.
Yes. He worshipped here quite often.
There's been a change in the attitude of the church. I suppose its position in society has changed over the years in a more a less Christian society, I think. Probably.
Well, possibly so, and I think society has changed too, in that you don't get folk coming suddenly on a Sunday dressed up in their Sunday best, because that's all the kind of thing, and all sorts of different things going on Sundays. And this is partly why the church has got to start thinking outside the box, as they call it nowadays, and really get to grips with getting involved with the community.
It's good that the building there's been new bits in the building. For instance, the stained glass for Douglas Fulton.
Yes.
Now that, to see it's a living thing that's
true
moving forward.
This is true.
And the colours at the back, is that the Scouts or the...
Well, partly, a lot of it is a record, if you like, of his interest sailing, for example.
Right.
So there's a lot of blue there and all the rest of it, and outdoor life. And of course, you'll have noticed too, there's a depiction of the Stone of Destiny.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
He apparently was in the fringes of the Glasgow University students' project to take it from Westminster to here. And I think he's quite proud of that.
Yes, indeed.
As you might expect.
Now, the bit that's older than the church itself is outside the front.
That's right. There's a cross and baptismal font which we think came from Holy Isle. It was dug up from the original graveyard and brought down here. And we had thought about getting it installed in the church, but the cost of it would be
Well, this morning when I came here, the cross had a wee fat robin sitting on it. So
yeah, I know.
Suffer the little children and the birds
there you
and the
go.
bees to come.
And then out at the back, of course, the hall is actually about 10 years or so older than the church.
The church, right.
Because it was there as a reading room and library at one point. And then it became used for council offices before they moved along there.
Yes.
So that's why we still have it.
The hall is still being used.
Oh, yes.
Quite extensively.
Absolutely.
And that would be one of the problems if it is no longer available.
Well, this is an impending problem, and it will need to be looked into very carefully. We did an impact survey not long ago, and we discovered, I'm not sure how they worked it out, but roughly about 150 people a week use the hall. And it is very much more used than it ever was before. And as you say, it will be a big loss if anything happened. But
so in your time here, Ian, what would you say your happiest memories of this church are?
I think the likes of even yesterday, the songs of praise and big services like that, weddings as well, where you see there's a lot of joy, and they kind of, fortunately over the years, the old-fashioned idea of coming to the Currie, in your black suit and your face as long as anything, have gone largely, and it has made a big difference. And I think too also the type of people who tend to come to Arran and settle here because they've maybe known it before or have come back from done their lives and work elsewhere, that brings a kind of variety of attitude which helps in a situation like this.
Well, we hope that there still will be a congregation in this area, and that the memories of the church will last with people for a long time.
Well, I think they will, and I'm sure that some of the folk you've seen or about to see today will help to emphasise that.
Thank you, Ian.
The builders of the church, I think, came from Islay or somewhere.
Right.
Married and stayed here.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Bowie was their name.
Bowie, And your grandfather put the first weather vane up there?
My grandfather was a ship's carpenter.
Right.
And I suppose he'd be used to climbing. And
Yes.
Hamilton was quite a common name in these days, and yet I don't know, how many was on this side of the island and connected to the ones on the other side.
Yeah. And the house you stay in now, your granny was the first tenant in that. And when
her name's in Brodick Castle, apparently.
Oh.
But my friend wasn't allowed to photograph it.
Oh, that's not very nice, is it?
Well, if you knew her as I knew her.
So when would your granny move into that?
Oh, well, it's over 100 years. I can't tell you exact date. I mean, I read it somewhere. And I think I had a printout when the monument was put up at the front. But as I say,
the clearance monument. Yes,
I was clearing things to save my family.
Yes.
I mean, so when you come to 95, Charlie, what do you expect?
What do you expect? So you'd be christened in here?
Well, I looked my birth certificate and it's stamped, just with a rubber stamp, baptised by the Reverend Andrew Kennedy, but the date not on it.
Oh, well.
But it didn't matter.
Oh, it doesn't. The fact that he's christened you in this very church.
Well, and I attended it.
And then you went to Sunday school. So the Sunday school was before the church when you were young?
It was 10:30 in the morning. And then you stayed on. I mean, 59, I think, was the number of the seat.
So you had your own pew?
Well, everybody had their own pew.
Their own family pew.
It wasn't that they paid for them in these days.
No.
They just sat in the same seats.
And the church would be quite full because everybody went to church.
Oh, yes. People would walk. I mean, there was nothing to do on a Sunday.
No, everything was shut. Yes. I heard a story about the church before this one, where a holidaymaker in Whiting Bay walked to Lamlash because there was no church in Whiting Bay.
Yes.
And he sat in the congregation and then he found out it was a Gaelic service. So they sat for 2 hours in a Gaelic service and then they had to sit for a further 2 hours in the English service. But that wouldn't happen. I think they were well into English by the time you came to this.
Yes, I would think so.
The likes of Hamilton Row, Hamilton Terrace, it would all be locals when
mostly, I think, employees.
Employees, right, that were workers at.
Yes. I don't know, it was my granny's signature that was in the book, but then my grandpa, I'm not sure when he died.
Right.
I would need to go and look at this cemetery.
And was the end building always the post office in your day?
No, Jimmy Toole was there. And I was saying to Alison, he played the organ, he played the bells, his wife ran concerts for the children and scrubbed the floor and did all sorts of things in these days.
And the hall was very much used as
yes.
in the community. Yes.
But they had put in a false ceiling, I don't know why, which was removed. And now the presbytery are not very happy. That's one of the things they're not happy about.
Because they played badminton in there, didn't they? Yes, I remember they had badminton.
Oh, it was used a lot. I mean, Mrs. Toole used to organise the children's parties and anything they were doing there at all.
And were you in the guild?
I was in the guild.
Was it quite an active guild here?
Yes, until fairly recently. But we had a lot of change of ministers.
Yes.
And I don't know whether that's affected the...
Douglas Fulton was here for a lot of years that you were attending.
Oh, why? In fact, Ravy's buried in the next layer to Douglas.
Is that right?
Aye. I was at her funeral because, well, we were born next door to one another.
Yes.
Although she was 10 months older than me, but we were friends.
So were you born at home or were you born at...
born, oh no, there was a district nurse used to come in or something.
Because my father, he was born at Drumadoon, and my grandfather, my father was born at Drumadoon rather than the hospital, but the hospital was open when you were born. It was 1921.
Well, it was, that's the War Memorial.
Yes, 1921. It was, so you'll have seen quite a lot of changes in the kirk in over the years.
Yes, and I think that's been the trouble here. I mean, to build a manse away up there, and as many steps and things.
Uh-huh.
I don't know why. I mean, they couldn't afford, I think, to renovate it. So they sold the one along at St. George's and built a new one. And it's never been a great success, I don't think. But
was that after Douglas Fulton that the new manse was built?
Yes, Douglas stayed in the one
along at
St. George's.
So they must have taken over the manse in 1926 when the United Free disappeared. They would use their manse.
I don't think it was 26, I can't remember. But I know the people from St. George's just joined us.
Joined the church.
There was no nonsense about it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they just came and after Jimmy Toole, Lena Sillers, you remember her? She played the organ in St. George's, but after Jimmy retired or whatever, she played the organ here for a time.
So the Toole family must have been heavily involved in everything that was going on.
Well, they just kind of did it.
Yes.
It was there and it had to be done.
So what will be your favourite memory of this church?
Well, I was quite young when, when I started coming to it. And we just, on a Sunday morning, you got up and you got washed and dressed and you came to the Sunday school.
Came to Sunday school,
And you stayed until
the
church service.
And how long would the church service be? Was it about an hour?
Well, his first prayer was 25 minutes usually.
25 minutes of prayer?
Oh, aye. I mean, you'd be off one end, aren't you?
And were you able to have a pan drop during this?
Yes. My auntie, Ching's wife, was very good with a pan drop.
So pan drops are the given thing for children in a church, I think.
I know, but if you drop them, and everything's quiet.
So when did you decide to move to the island?
Well, in 1978, my wife and I were here staying with our aunt and uncle. And we saw a house, it looked a good buy, and we bought one of the Hamilton Terrace houses. And we had that as a holiday house for 38 years. And during that time, we came to church from time to time. There was one Sunday, we came down in the middle of February, hadn't checked the house since New Year. And we came in and the house was Baltic. It was absolutely freezing.
Yes, I don't think insulation was a consideration when they built Hamilton Terrace.
No, the insulation value was nil. So we came to the church for an hour to heat up.
Oh, to heat up.
We left the fire on and came to church.
Welcome into the warm arms of the kirk.
Yeah. One of my daughters was married here in this church. She married a local boy, and that was Bill McMillan, was the minister at that time.
Yes.
And really, I was quite proud of that day. Walking around.
Well, giving away your daughter is one of the finest days of your life, isn't it?
It is indeed.
Yeah. So were you an elder in the kirk up in Glasgow before you came down here?
Yes, I was an elder. I was first appointed an elder at Father in Parish Church in Aberdeenshire.
Right.
About another 15 years in Glasgow, in Merrilee Parish Church. And so I've been an elder for quite a long time. Got a certificate at one stage to prove the point.
To prove that you'd served. So when you came down here, it was a natural progression to join the session here.
Well, I decided I was taking a year away from everything, but they kept pestering me.
So it wouldn't be as onerous here as in a busy church like Merrilee?
Well, this is different. I've now been the property convener in 3 different churches.
Right.
And they all had different problems.
And the fabric is a big thing for the church, isn't it?
Well, yes, it's also quite embarrassing at times because I become the money spender and everybody else is one of the fundraisers. Particularly when you take a church like this, which is an A-listed building. And
yes, because
you have to maintain the
with its
status.
age. Yes. And the fact that you've got such a tall tower as well. For the
yeah, we had to get a steeplejack a few years ago to go up there and take out the weeds that were growing on the top of the bell tower. And that was a bit...
I actually heard a story about that steeplejack, and the person that told me it was amazed at how he came down the side of the building.
Yeah, he doesn't have any ropes.
He thought the man had no nerves whatsoever.
Well, I don't have the best head for heights, and I mean, I certainly there was no way you were going to be up there to come down the outside of the rope. But he was perfectly comfortable with it. One of the funny things that I remember was when I was about 7 years old, the first time I came to this church, and at the end of the hymns, some churches the people sing an amen, and others just sit down.
Yes.
Well, the church was full, probably half holiday makers and half residents. And at the end of the first hymn, the visitors sat down. And the residents stayed standing and sang the Amen. And the visitors then, they decided
didn't know whether to be up or down.
So they stood up, and as they stood up, the residents sat down because they were finished. And it went like this through the whole service because they could never get their timing quite right.
And at the benediction, did you do the many amens as well?
Yeah, they did the three, but that was the thing, everybody did the three amens.
They've been caught out with that one as well. So you must have had many happy times in here through your life.
I mean, we played tennis every day, except a Sunday. In fact, I mean, the Sunday closure was pretty well 100%. And there was no golf, tennis, bowls, putting, boats. We used to hire boats. You couldn't do that on a Sunday. Mm-hmm. In fact, I think the cafe even was closed on a Sunday. Not actually certain about that, but...
Well, in Blackwaterfoot, my father used to do a service in the 11th Green at Blackwaterfoot Golf Course, and the organ that was used for that is now in the museum, because on Sunday, as you say, there was no golf, and in fact a lot of people didn't cook on a Sunday either. I don't think they made their food on the Saturday night.
Well, I hadn't heard that. There's a large Jewish community in the south side of Glasgow where I lived, and a lot of them, the Orthodox Jews, didn't cook on the Saturday.
Being a minister's son myself, and been brought up in a parish, you must have felt the goldfish bowl effect when you had been brought up in Lamlash.
That's quite a good way to put it. Yes, I had a lot of aunties and uncles who weren't aunties and uncles, but I think we were the first children in the manse for a long time, so everybody looked out for us.
Mm-hmm. And you and Gavin were both born on Arden?
Yes, up in War Memorial Hospital.
So being brought up in a parish, in Pollock there was 10,000 people, which meant that I didn't really know everybody and I could hide. But within Lamlash, you were in the problem of the fact that you couldn't really hide because no matter what you did, there was somebody from the parish would see you.
Yes, that's true. And it actually got a little bit worse than that because there was always a bit of apprehension on Sunday morning going to church, sitting in the pews at the front with the other children, because you knew as sure as guns that Dad was going to talk about his young friends in the children's address, and everybody would be tittering, laughing, and we'd both be sitting there quite embarrassed about the daft things that were being described. So it was always a relief to leave to go to the church hall behind to get out of the rest of the service.
So you were in for the first hymn and then it was the children's dress?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So what's your earliest memory of being in Lamlash Church?
We always, as a family, put the Christmas tree up in the church, and it always went at the bottom of the stairs up to the pulpit. And for some reason, we put the tree up, and it was enormous. And my job was to climb up the banisters and hang on to the brass light fitting at the top to put the star on the top of the tree. Why we didn't put the star on when it was lying on the ground in the first place, I don't know.
It's best left to adults to work out things doing badly. So you went through Sunday school, and did you get involved in when you were a teenager as being part of the church?
We had what was called a Bible class. It was basically a badminton club. We played badminton on a Saturday night in the church hall, and we went carol singing at Christmas. That was the Bible class.
Your father was there for many years, 28 years, was it?
I can't remember. All he used to say was that he would only move if they offered him St. Giles.
Right. So he stuck by, and he was very much a member of the community, and I've attended a few of his services and also funerals, and a lot of his close friends passed before him. And do you think your father found it difficult to perform the ceremony for somebody that was a close friend?
I think so, but I think the things that bothered him most were there was an accident up the back road where a tree fell across a car. And I remember, I was only in primary school, I remember the kitchen being full of people, and this was after that. So I think those kind of things bothered him more than the actual service thing.
For many people, your father was Lamlash Church because he was there for so many years, but he had other activities as well, didn't he? He was keen on sailing.
Yeah. He and Dr. Starks went off sailing up the West Coast. How he got out of doing his Sunday service, I don't know, and how we lived without a doctor, I don't know, but the pair of them went off. And he liked that kind of thing. And he was a member of the yacht club as well.
When you left school, did you go off island?
Yes, I left at 16 to go to university. And actually it was quite a traumatic day because for some reason I was sent on my own with my brother who was 4 years younger than me. So he was 12 and I was 16.
He was only 12, 16.
Went on the boat, got to Ardrossan, if it was Ardrossan, I don't know. The boat then decided it wasn't going anywhere, so I had to decide what to do with my brother. There were no mobile phones, so I took him to Glasgow with me on the train, saw Arran people getting back on the train, so decided in my innocence that, oh, well, the boat must be sailing, and shoved Gavin back on the boat rather than the train. Then I got a phone call at the halls of residence from my father being angry with me because he had to phone the head of the presbytery to go and rescue Gavin from Fairley or Ardrossan. So that was the start of university life.
Your first day at university life, and you're in trouble with your dad. So when did you return to the island, Rona?
I didn't for almost 30 years. So I came back in 2003.
So what's your favourite memory of Lamlash Church?
I think I just remember playing in it. I was just a big playground. Whenever Dad was along there, I'd be running up and down the pews. I played with the organ, and I would try and get the loudest noise out of that thing as possible while he was doing whatever he was doing. So it was just a playground. It wasn't really... It wasn't really a church. It was just somewhere to go.
What a fantastic plaything. I've heard the Lamlash organ at full blast, and it must have made quite some sound. Did you get up to the belfry to play with the bells as well?
Yes, I learnt to play the bells from Mr. Wood, who was the English teacher at the high school, and he was quite a disciplinarian. So I would be playing, and when I came down and we were walking home from church, there was always a few comments, and it was mainly, "Oh, we knew you were playing," which probably meant I'd made a lot of mistakes.
I'm sure you didn't.
I was thinking back before talking to you about the fact that when Dad first came here, he had what Mother called the company bike that somebody gave him. And that was how he got about the village. And it had white walled tyres. That was before I was born, he had that bike. So he obviously then must have cycled to the church in it with his gown on. And then the church in its wisdom at some point when Ian MacLeod was in Brodick, so it was quite far on, the church decided to buy all the ministers a car on Arn. So they all got white Ford Fiestas with very similar number plates. You never knew who you were waving at because they all looked the same.
You knew it was a minister, though.
Yes.
We were lucky in Pollock because we were in Dumbright Road, which is about 3-4 miles away. Did people turn up at the manse door a lot when you were in Lamlash?
Yes, yeah, that was a regular occurrence. Sometimes they were fine, and sometimes they'd been to the pub for too long, so they had to be escorted into the study, and the door was firmly shut. Yeah, we had a lot of visitors all the time. One thing I do remember, which is more to do with growing up here on Arran, was the summer holidays. Our house was absolutely packed with folk from the mainland. Everybody came to visit us. So the whole summer you spent sharing the house with at least 4 or 5 other folk. And, all the bedrooms were full to overflowing. And Mum took, through some charity in Glasgow, gave children a holiday that wouldn't normally get a holiday. So often we would have a brother and sister or 2 sisters staying with us, and that was their holiday for the week. So they would live in the manse with us.
And would you be given the task of entertaining them?
And got into trouble if anything went wrong.
Well, one of the things is that ministers' children go one of 2 ways. I don't go to church at all. Rarely am I at the church, but I still have my beliefs. But the view of being brought up in a church was you see all the bad sides of the session and the petty squabbling and all the things that happen in a church. And I kind of resented that. I didn't feel that it was worshipping God in the way that it should be worshipped. So I removed myself from the church. So much so that when I was asked to do late calls by Chris Atkins in 92, Evelyn Sellers said to me, "What the heck are you doing late calls? You don't go to church." And I said, the people that go to church don't have any exclusivity in religion, which Evelyn took. She was a good friend, so I could argue with her. Do you go to church still?
I was a bit like yourself. I went off the whole thing, and only recently, when Alison told me that she was playing the bells, I used to do that. So I started going to play the bells, and then that meant I had to go in afterwards. So
there's no Mr. Woods now to criticise your playing.
Maureen, when did you first come to the island?
October 1959.
And how did that come about?
Well, I met and married a Scot from Ayrshire, and he came over here to start up a business, Bill Pattison.
And that was you ever since?
I've been here ever since, yes.
Mm-hmm. And how did you get involved with the church?
Well, I was involved in church at home before I came up here, so I just started to come to church with my husband when I came here.
Mm-hmm. Now, many people will go to church on a Sunday and go home and get involved in the work of the church, but you've got a slightly different angle to it. You now ring the bells.
When I retired from nursing, I was asked if I'd like to come on a Sunday by Isabel McClure to help them ring the bells.
And did you have any musical history before that?
I played the piano. But you don't have to have a musical history. You can learn the bells and play the bells without that.
Right. And I noticed that it's do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do that is the...
Yes, there's 9. There's the full octave and one extra.
One extra.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And what about maintenance? I mean, how long do the ropes last?
Oh, as far as I know, the ropes have been there forever.
Now, these bells are pretty special in Scotland, are they not? I think
Yes, they're Helicon bells. We got them in, I think it was 1896. It was presented by the 12th Duke of Hamilton.
Hamilton, yeah.
And then a few years later, that was 8 bells. And then quite a number of years later, somebody else donated another bell, so that's how.
That's why you have the extra bell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But there's not many bells like this in Scotland anymore, is there?
I don't think so. No, I think we're the only ones in Scotland that have
them. Because none of the other churches have that array that you have.
No, they just have the toll, one toll. Here on Arran.
I suppose the only time that they wouldn't be used was during the war.
That's right. They weren't used during the war.
But the day in 1944 or 45 when they actually did it, it must have been a joyous day for them to.
It must have, yes.
To have everything. Well, Mick, you've known this building and the church for a long, long time.
You could say that, Charlie, because I was christened here. I was used to go to Jimmy Toole's young choir. I had 4 daughters christened here. I was married here. That was before I've had 3 daughters married here. I've been various family funerals, and I've been an elder for quite a few years. In fact, I was on door duty yesterday, so I'm quite involved.
So this building and this congregation are very much a part of your family?
Very, very much. Mm-hmm. Both sides of my family.
Mm-hmm. A christening is a happy event.
Yeah.
A funeral is a saying goodbye. Uh-huh. And yet you're in the same building but with different feelings.
Yeah, different feelings, aye. Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I've been involved with it for one way and another for sort of 40 years cleaning the ruins and stuff like that, you know. Mm. Yeah.
So it is a practical thing as well,
Oh yeah, I mean, I feel very much part of the church. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you'll have seen a few ministers through your time.
I have indeed, aye. I think the one I liked most, or who I was most friendly with, was Douglas Fulton. Mm-hmm. I like Douglas.
And we see there's a window in his
yeah, that was a bit special that day for Douglas. It's there's all sorts of things you'll see that there's a bay there. That's because he was a dinghy sailor.
Yes.
There's a reference to the army when he was in the army, and there's various things that Douglas was interested in.
So you'd be part of the commissioning of that window?
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Yes. Although this church was in the 1880s, that there's still something new that has been got into the building with that to remember the minister's service.
Well, that's right. There's different things you look around and you see the Miss Ferguson's window and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. That boat over there, that was given to the church in 1988 by old Mrs. Walker at Craigdood. You would remember her, because at one point she told me her uncle Willie McMillan was skipper of that picture, that boat there.
Fabulous.
Which is another local.
In some places, the church is separate from the community, but I think in Lamlash it's integrated into the community. So there's
being a local, I know quite a few people who they don't go to church, but there's a wee bit in here that they follow the church and donate and stuff like that, but not necessarily going every Sunday.
But not only is the church used, the hall's been quite...
Well, the hall is very, very much part of the village because we don't have another hall now.
No.
The village can use the school hall, but it's very much if it's available.
If it's available, yes.
But, I mean, there are a number of organisations that use that hall that are going to be sorely put to when it closes, or if it closes.
If it closes, yes. So, as an elder, you'll have seen a lot of people come and go through, visitors coming into the church.
There's some people are really interested. In fact, last summer, I come out of the cooperative and somebody else involved in the church says, here, there's a guy looking to see if he could get into the church. Have you got your key? I said, aye. So I let him and his wife into the church. They were over here for a day and they were from Canada. And he had been born in Lamlash during the war and had been christened in this church.
In this church.
And he was so chuffed that he could get back in and have a look at it.
Lamlash has always been the kind of seafaring bit of Arran. And the church, as you say, connected with that.
Well, I'm an ex-merchant seaman myself. I left, I went to the Merchant Navy when I was 17. And that, as you say, it's a family thing. I'm one of 7 cousins who were at sea. You know the McQueen boys?
Yes, indeed.
They were all in Sandy Picken, Eddie, you know. So it's a family thing as well.
And you bring that to the congregation that it appreciates. I mean, there's a number of sailors we have now.
Well, that's right. I mean, I've been involved in the yacht club for as long as it's been going. It's good fun, you know.
So what will be your special memory of this church?
Getting married in it. Come on, Charlie. What else is it?
And do you hold it against your wife still?
Yeah, but I have a lot of happy memories.
So how did you get involved with the church?
Well, we were involved with that straight away because we were Methodists and we were churchgoers, you know, down in Wakefield. And the children were at Sunday school. So it was automatic that we came here.
And you felt that you wanted to give something back by being involved, not just as a member of the congregation.
Oh, yes. I mean, we joined in with everything that was going. We had children who came to the Sunday school. I got involved in the Sunday school, the Bible class, and you know, from there it eventually went to coffee mornings and member of the guild. And
it's quite an active guild in Lamlash, wasn't there?
Yes, it was. Yes. I didn't join the guild until fairly later on because, of course, I'd been working full-time, you know, at the high school.
Yes.
And it was the same with the Save the Children. I didn't join the Save the Children until after it retired. So as things do happen, that when you retire, you acquire different things to do.
So what would, at the high school, you were a teacher of?
I was the secretary.
So you're the secretary?
School secretary,
right.
yes.
So you're David,
yes.
you worked with...
David's secretary, yes.
That's the most important role in the school, is it not, secretary?
Oh, definitely.
Nothing happens
falls to pieces without the secretary.
Without you doing that.
The secretary and the janitor, that's it.
Yes, he's the one with the sawdust.
Yeah, yeah.
So you became more and more involved when you retired
yes,
in the church.
Yes, that's right. My biggest disappointment coming to the church here was that there wasn't the same interest in music as we had down in Wakefield.
So you're disappointed when you came here that there wasn't a choir?
I was disappointed that there wasn't a choir. It seemed that there were not enough people in the congregation that were sort of singers and, well, that I don't know whether there ever had been a choir or not. But John Dick was music teacher at the school, and he had a lot to do with, with the church, and he started off the John Dick concert on just before Christmas.
Yes.
And he involved people, in the church. I tried to introduce the younger ones in singing. We got to the stage of putting on in the church Joseph and his Technicolor Dreamcoat. We did it in church, and there's never been anything like it since.
Betty, you and your husband came to Arn to the school first.
That's right. We came for the job at Arn High School as music teacher in 1981. And we'd been to Arran many years on holiday and liked the place, so we thought we'll have a go. And that's what we did. And in those days, the job of organist at the parish church went along with the job at the high school. And David Oakes was an elder in this church, so he got John to play, and he played for 24 years here before he died.
John was trained anyway at that, because his degree was in voice and organ.
It was voice and organ. So it was Glasgow Cathedral, John Turner, that was his tutor. So he was passionate about the organ. So to come to this organ, which is a particularly good one, he was delighted. So
yes, it is a unique organ, isn't it?
Yes, so I believe.
And it must have been a pleasure for John to get the sound out of it.
It really was, and people would complain, mind you, when they were going out, because they couldn't hear themselves talk, because he let it rip. But
when you have an instrument like that,
yes,
it's got to be played to the full.
Its full capacity.
Mm-hmm. So you get involved in the church as well, although you were Baptists before you came over to Arran.
We were, but on the very first day, Mr. Fulton, who was the minister then, was shaking hands at the door, and I said to him, "Are you needing any help in the Sunday school?" He said, "Oh yes, we are." So from there on in, I taught in the Sunday school, and in those days we had 30 children, and it was wonderful.
Did you split the class?
Yes.
You split them to age groups?
Yes, I got 2 friends in the church, and I mean, you understand, when I came here I didn't know anybody.
Yes.
So you had to sort of suss out who was suitable. And they would come to my house and we would prepare the lessons. There was 3 of us, and we had 10 children each. And
so it must have been quite something to see children christened in the church and then coming through to your...
Yes, it really was. It was quite a privilege, You feel that whatever they do afterwards, they've had a good grounding.
Yes.
And, and even when you get to my age in life, you look back and you think, now, what have I actually done with my life? What have I done that counts? And that's one of the things I always think, well, all those children got to hear God's word.
Yes. And you were the delivery
instrument
through which it came.
Yes.
That's fabulous.
Yeah.
Now, John felt very strongly about the person with cancer, and he set up the concert at the school first of all.
Yes, the carol concert was already in existence at the school, but it was the old high school then, and the concerts were held in the gym hall. A, it didn't hold very many, and B, it wasn't exactly salubrious. So David Oakes was John's boss, and he was also an elder here. So between them, they decided that they could move the carol concert, which was an annual event, to the church. And that's what we did. And from then on in, the church would be packed the first Monday in December every year. And it was packed to capacity because the way to get parents and adults to church is to have their children perform. And grannies and aunties and uncles and all turned out for, and it was John's choirs that would do it. You know.
Of course, John would
play the organ
and harmonies.
Yes, it was.
That wasn't just Kilbride Church, though. They came from all over the island.
Oh, yes. Well, there's only one high school on Arran, so every child that went to high school went through the music regime, you know. So one way or another, you know, if they couldn't sing, they got playing the drums, and they got, you know, it involved them all. So it was.
And that became an annual event.
It became an annual event, and there was one pupil who had leukemia and died sadly, and John and David decided that the proceeds every year would go to Sir Malcolm Sargent Cancer Fund for Children. And
so it was a worthwhile thing.
Yeah, it was. You know, it was usually about £500.
Oh, that's excellent.
Each concert,
yeah,
so it was worthwhile.
So, how did you come from in the church hall through there with the children to being a reader?
Well, there aren't any children now, and we don't. If they have, you know, if children turn up, then we have a wee session for them just there. But I decided that that we children are not really wanting their granny teaching them, so I felt it was time for younger ones to take over. And so I don't know how I got coerced into reading, but I did. My father used to say that I could sell coal. I had a voice that projected.
Yes.
So I think that's my credential.
And tell me, what's the hardest bit of the Bible you had to read?
Oh, well, one day it was a list from the Old Testament of so-and-so begat, so-and-so begat, so-and-so, and I read it at home first and thought, oh, dear me, this is awful. And then I thought, there'll not be a soul in the church who'll be any the wiser how to pronounce it. So if I just bluff it and look as though I know what I'm talking about, which is exactly what I did, and there was not a soul. I was actually congratulated in getting through it all.
Yes.
But I think, you know, it's just being confident.
Yes. And so you bluffed your way through that.
I bluffed my way through it.
Do you have a favourite passage from the Bible?
Yes, I think my favourite passage is, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are good, whatsoever things are lovely, think on these things. I feel that what you put in your mind, and that's television, books, conversations, whatever, makes the person you are.
Yes.
And I feel that verse it's quite a precious one to me.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Do you have a favourite moment of your time in Kilbride Church?
Oh, it's hard. It's with the threat of closure that you look back and there's so many things that are precious. But it was lovely when I had a lot of wee children to teach, you know, and
yes.
I can remember one harvest festival, and they'd all brought, in those days you brought fruit and vegetables, and there was this wee soul, he had brought a melon, and it rolled right down the aisle, and I had to chase him and the melon. You know, things like that. So you remember all these things.
Yeah, that would get a good laugh.
Well, it did.
I've noticed it's quite a difficult organ to play.
I mean, all organs are difficult to play. I mean, everyone's brought up in the piano, and I mean, basically the things that you do with your left hand on the piano, you do with your feet on the organ, and actually making that cultural switch. You know, you get some horrible exercises to do, which just kind of strain your mind, to play your left hand, which you think should be playing the bass. Getting it to do something while your feet do the bass. But once you master that, then all organs are, effectively the same.
And how long have you been an organ player?
Oh gosh, I've been playing piano since I was 8, and playing the organ for probably for about 20 years. So
did you do so on the mainland before you came to the island?
Yes, I've been the organist at Cambuslang Old, and the organist that was at Cross Hill in Motherwell. And I've been doing St Margaret's in Motherwell for the last 12 years.
So when did you come to the island?
5 years ago, 2017, that we came into the church at that point, and it was great for me to get a shot of this.
I suppose the organs, unlike pianos, will each have their own idiosyncrasies.
They do, and there's a lot. I mean, the trick to the organ is it's actually matching the instrument with the acoustics of the building. I mean, you can go into, I shall not name the church. There's a church that I play in occasionally, and it's the most magnificent organ, but it's just not matching the acoustics of the building. It's just wasted in that space.
Am I correct in thinking that these pipes that we see up there are false?
These pipes are merely decorative. If you go to any church in Scotland, you'll see that they're actually symmetrical both sides, which is the giveaway. I mean, a lot of the pipes are, if you imagine, kind of rolled up tin foil, about 2 or 3 inches long. That's what most organ pipes are like. So and so it's very, very delicate. You don't want to go, wading.
And is there much maintenance in these things?
It has the problem that because it's in a church building, which tends to be used once a week, that you put the heating on, and so it gets really hot for an hour a week, and then it gets really, really, really cold. So it's that temperature differential. So it needs to be tuned regularly rather than maintained.
Right.
Obviously, when they specified it, they've gone for something which is not showy and fancy. It's very, very straightforward. It's standard, but it's very, very high quality.
Right.
And the acoustics of it are really superb. I mean, when I listened to it and played it, I thought, gosh, actually the match for this in the building is tremendous. And reading up in the history of it, there's a Mr. Henderson, who was the organist at Glasgow University for a number of years. Now I'm talking around about the 1930s.
Yeah.
He had come here to play it, and he wrote to the minister in the Kirk session afterwards, and he said, look, I've played hundreds of organs in hundreds of churches, but see this organ in Lamlash, for its size and scale in terms of what it does to the building, it's by far and away the best that I've seen.
That's fabulous to know that.
Right, and so he was so it really was of its time. So it's been built like anything that where you don't have maintenance engineers on the island, right? It's been built to be robust, but it's a very, very high quality.
And do you find it an honour to be?
I really find it an honour that when I was a wee boy that came here in my summer holidays and ran around the beach when the summer mission was here, and they came into Lamlash Church. So I remember Lamlash Church from then, and and of course it's one of your first experiences of hearing an organ in church.
Yes.
And just thinking it's and I'm glad it's one of the few childhood memories I've got where the actuality, when you visit it in adulthood, is actually better than you remember it as a kid.
Wow, that's fantastic.
So it's just it's a lovely instrument to play.
first memory, I suppose it's not really my memory, I think it's my mum's memory, was of sitting on the bench outside the church, looking across the Holy Isle while my dad was having his interview at the school, the high school. He had applied for a job as a science teacher, and she said, looking at me and looking at the village, she had really hoped that my dad would get the job, and he did. And so we moved to Lamlash. I think it'd be 1957 then, so you can work out my age from that. 1957, and we had a really happy time there. I just remember it being the happiest part of my childhood. We were there till I was 10. Two of my brothers were born there and baptised in the church there. Our minister was Douglas Fulton, and I remember him quite well. He came to visit us in the house, and we became quite good friends. He always had a word for us, and sometimes a sweetie in his pocket. And I remember the stories he would tell in the church, and I remember the Sunday school. I remember too that we used to sit on the pew just on the left as we came in the door, and I have a nasty suspicion that's because we were nearly always late trying to get out with a youngster and a toddler and a baby. I vaguely remember my brother's christenings. My second youngest brother, I vaguely remember his christening, and a great deal of fuss being made of that. And I remember that he didn't cry, and everybody was delighted that this baby had cried or not. I don't know. But I do remember Douglas Fulton coming to visit us, and I remember a conversation he had with my mum and dad about possibility of women ministers. And he wasn't sure about the idea. He was a little bit worried that these women ministers would come and would be in the pulpit and they would wear lipstick and dangly earrings. So later, when I came as a minister in 2008, I thought about Douglas often when I was getting ready to go to church, and I was very careful to wear discreet lipstick and no dangly earrings, just in deference to Douglas, who was a nice man and a great minister to us. When I came back in 2008, a lot of people said, oh gosh, you mustn't go back to a place that you grew up in as a child, because people will remember you in a certain capacity. It's not a good idea to go back. But when I did come back, of course, I was the minister of Lamlash and Kilmorey, so I have separate memories of Kilmorey Church. But what I do remember about the joint events was that people got on really well together, and my induction was fantastic. And everybody joined together to celebrate a new ministry, and I was delighted to be there. What else can I say about Lamlash Church? Oh yes, we had some super occasions. We had an occasion where we had a bluegrass band came and we filled the church to capacity. It was absolutely wonderful. There were the Christmas choir events, the usual nativity plays. It was one Christmas, just before Christmas, we had organised a nativity play, but there had been an announcement that the boat was going to be off. And so all those who were in the nativity play, who were going to stay with their grannies or whatever for Christmas, had already disappeared by the time of the nativity play. And I had to do the play all by myself using wooden spoons as characters. So I had to dress up the wooden spoons and read the whole script by myself. It was the one and only time that I had to do something like that. When I came back, the very first service that I took in Lamlash Church, it was so lovely to be greeted at the door by the man who had been my GP when I was a little girl. And he told me a story about having to come and read the riot act because I didn't take my medicine for the measles. He was our senior elder at the time and was always there beside me at communion, and that was really, really special. I remember too my former Sunday school teacher, Mary Mackenzie, and met her on the day that I came to preach for the charge of Kilmorey and Lamlash, and on those occasions the congregation votes. It's always a bit nerve-wracking, so it was lovely to see that a face that I remembered and who remembered me, and I suppose that was where I became a Christian. So perhaps I wouldn't have come back to Lamlash Church, which had been vacant for 8 years when I came. I wouldn't have come back to Lamlash Church if it hadn't been for those people that looked after me in Sunday school, if it hadn't been for Douglas, our minister, if it hadn't been for, and just said to me how important that early start is for little ones in church. It was a fantastic almost 5 years that I was there, and I was really sorry to leave. My plan had been to be there until I retired, but my husband was made redundant, lost his job, and ended up having to work in Aberdeen. So we were living in 2 different places for 3 years. Some of the other things that we did was welcome the Salvation Army band across to the Green, and absolutely super services in rain, hail or shine outside the church. And those bells, the bells are really special. They were recorded for the BBC service for See Sunday. And I still have the recording of that. Whenever I'm feeling homesick for Aaron, I listen to those. I remember too, my aunt and uncle, my aunt's still living in Lamlash, my uncle, who had always sworn that he would never go to church. And when they moved to Lamlash, he started going along to Lamlash Church and ultimately became a Christian in his later years, and then an elder. And was a great exponent of Lamlash Church and met very many friends there, John Forbes. In fact, one of the boat that's the reconstructed boat that's inside the church was something that he repaired and put on the wall there. So very special memories of a very special building, not just a building for the Christians in the community, but a building for the whole community of Lamlash. And well, I don't know what St. Malasha would say about all these church closures, how he would feel. He was the one who brought Christianity to that part of Scotland, and I'm sure that will continue, and whether the buildings continue or not. And I hope that some use is made of the building at the very least, and that maybe there can be some services from time to time in Lamlash Church. I certainly owe my life's work to what happened in that church when I was a little girl.